In November 1875, Egypt faced financial collapse. Its ruler needed money immediately. Not next month, not next week. Within 48 hours. If the cash did not arrive, Egypt would default on its debt, and the consequences would be global. What followed was not a war, not an invasion, not a treaty. It was a silent financial deal. In just 2 days, control over the world's most important trade route changed hands. A deal so fast that even European governments were caught off guard. At the center of it stood a powerful banking family and a canal that controlled global trade. The Suez Canal. This is the story of how desperation, debt, and speed allowed one loan to reshape the Middle East forever. In the mid-19th century, Egypt dreamed of becoming a modern power, a nation equal to Europe. The key to that dream was the Suez Canal. For centuries, ships traveled around Africa to reach Asia. The route was long, expensive, and dangerous. A canal through Egypt would cut the journey by thousands of miles. Whoever controlled it would control global trade. Egypt's ruler, Khedive Ismail, understood this perfectly. He wanted Egypt to be the bridge between East and West. Construction began in 1859. The project was led by French diplomat Ferdinand de Lesseps. At first, Egypt used forced labor. Tens of thousands of peasants worked in brutal conditions. When forced labor was banned under European pressure, costs exploded. Machinery replaced manpower. Expenses multiplied. Egypt borrowed heavily to keep the project alive. European banks offered loans at harsh interest rates. By the time the canal opened in 1869, Egypt was already sinking. Ismail continued borrowing. Railways, palaces, European-style cities. Prestige mattered more than sustainability. By the early 1870s, Egypt's debt had reached crisis levels. Government revenues were mortgaged years in advance. Taxes increased. Public anger spread. Still, Ismail refused to slow down. Behind the celebrations, the treasury was empty. By 1875, Egypt stood on the edge of bankruptcy. European creditors demanded guarantees. They wanted real assets. And Egypt had one asset the world desperately wanted: the Suez Canal. Egypt owned 44% of the canal's shares. Those shares meant influence over global trade and imperial power. Selling them was dangerous, but default was worse. Ismail needed cash immediately. That urgency opened the door to a deal completed in just 48 hours, a deal that would quietly transfer control of the canal, not through soldiers, but through finance. And in the shadows of this moment stood the Rothschilds family. When news of Egypt's financial collapse reached Europe, one country reacted faster than all others: Britain. By the 1870s, Britain was the world's largest trading empire. Its power depended on speed, and nothing threatened that speed more than losing access to the Suez Canal. Nearly 40% of Britain's trade with India passed through the canal. So did military communications and troop movements. If a rival power gained control, Britain's empire would be exposed. France already had strong influence over the canal. Other European powers were watching closely. London could not afford delay. At the center of Britain's response stood Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. Understood the danger immediately. But there was a problem. The British Parliament was slow. Debates would take weeks. Egypt needed money in days. Disraeli could not wait for approval. If Britain hesitated, someone else would buy the shares. So he made a decision that would shock even his own government. He went directly to the Rothschild family. At the time, the Rothschilds were the most powerful banking family in Europe. They had cash reserves, governments did not. Disraeli contacted Lionel D. Rothschild in London. His request was simple but urgent: advance the money. Immediately. The amount was enormous for the time. About £4 million. There were no parliamentary votes. No public announcement. Within 48 hours, the Rothschilds arranged the funds. The loan was issued to the British government. Britain then used that money to purchase Egypt's canal shares. The transaction was completed in near total secrecy. On November 25, 1875, Britain officially bought 44% of the Suez Canal Company. Egypt received the cash it desperately needed, but it lost something far more valuable: control. This was not a military conquest. No flags were raised, no soldiers marched. Yet Britain now held decisive influence over the canal. The speed of the deal stunned Europe. France was caught off guard. Other powers realized too late what had happened. Disraeli later described the purchase as bold and necessary. But even his critics admitted one thing: timing made it possible. Without the Rothschild loan, Britain would have missed its chance. And Egypt, trapped by debt, had no room to negotiate. The canal had not been seized by force. It had been bought in a moment of weakness. This single financial move shifted power in the Middle East. It marked the beginning of direct British control over Egypt's future, and it proved a new rule of empire. In the modern world, money could move faster than armies. In the next section, we'll see how this deal turned financial influence into political control, and why Egypt's independence was now only an illusion. The purchase of the Suez Canal shares solved Britain's immediate problem, but it created a much bigger one for Egypt. The loan gave Britain influence. Debt turned that influence into control. After 1875, Egypt was no longer financially independent. Its budget was now watched by foreign powers. Britain and France established what became known as dual control. Two European officials supervised Egypt's finances, taxes, spending, debt repayments. All decisions passed through foreign hands. Egyptian officials remained in office. But real authority had shifted. For ordinary Egyptians, life became harder. Taxes increased to satisfy creditors. Cotton production was expanded to earn foreign currency. Food security was ignored. Public anger grew. Khedive Ismail tried to resist. He dismissed European officials. The response was swift. In 1879, Britain and France forced the Ottoman Sultan to remove Ismail from power. His son, Tawfiq Pasha, replaced him. This was a turning point. Egypt's ruler was no longer chosen by Egyptians alone. Foreign approval had become essential. Financial control soon triggered political instability. In 1881, a nationalist movement emerged inside the Egyptian army. It was led by Colonel Ahmed Urabi. Urabi demanded an end to foreign interference. He called for constitutional rule. His movement gained massive public support. Britain saw this as a direct threat. If nationalism succeeded, control of the canal could be challenged. That risk was unacceptable. In 1882, Britain intervened militarily. British forces bombarded Alexandria. They then defeated Urabi's army at the Battle of Tel el-Kebir. Egypt was occupied. Officially, Britain claimed it was temporary. In reality, it lasted for decades. Egypt remained under British control until the mid-20th century. The canal was now protected by soldiers, not contracts. Finance had opened the door. The army walked through it. This occupation reshaped the Middle East. British influence spread across Egypt, Sudan, and the Red Sea routes. The region became central to imperial strategy, and it all traced back to one financial decision. A loan made in 48 hours, the Suez Canal had not just changed trade routes, it had changed who ruled Egypt. What began as debt management ended as occupation. This was the new model of empire. First, control the money. Then, control the state. British occupation secured the Suez Canal, but it did not secure legitimacy. For decades, Egypt lived under indirect rule. British advisors controlled key decisions. The canal became the center of imperial strategy. It protected trade, troops, and communication lines. During World War I, Britain formally declared Egypt a protectorate. The canal became a military artery. After the war, Egyptian nationalism did not disappear, it grew stronger. In 1922, Britain declared Egypt formally independent. But this independence was limited. British troops remained. The canal stayed under foreign control. Egypt had a flag and a government, but not full sovereignty. The Suez Canal symbolized this contradiction. Economic importance without political ownership. Throughout the early 20th century, Egyptian leaders tried to renegotiate control. Britain refused. The canal generated enormous revenue. Most of it flowed abroad. For Egyptians, this was a reminder of humiliation. Their land served global powers. After World War II, the balance of power began to shift. European empires weakened. Nationalist movements surged across the Middle East. Egypt was no exception. In 1952, a group of military officers overthrew the monarchy. The old order collapsed. Among them was Gamal Abdel Nasser. Nasser understood the canal's symbolic power. It represented a century of foreign domination. In July 1956, he made a historic decision. Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal. The reaction was immediate. Britain and France saw the move as unacceptable. Israel joined them. The result was the Suez Crisis. Militarily, Egypt was vulnerable. Politically, the world had changed. The United States and the Soviet Union opposed the invasion. European powers were forced to withdraw. For the first time, Egypt retained control of the canal. This moment marked the true end of imperial dominance in the region. Not through loans, not through diplomacy, but through political reality. The 48-hour loan of 1875 still echoed in 1956. It had set a chain of events in motion. Debt led to control. Control led to occupation. Occupation led to resistance. The Suez Canal was no longer just a trade route. It had become a symbol of how finance can shape nations, and how nations eventually push back. The Middle East that emerged after Suez was different. More unstable, more assertive, and more aware of the cost of foreign dependency. The lesson of the canal remains relevant today. When control begins with money, it rarely ends with money. The purchase of the Suez Canal shares in 1875 was not just a historical event, it was a blueprint. For the first time, a major geopolitical shift happened without war. No invasion, no treaty, just money, speed, and timing. That 48-hour loan proved something new. Control no longer required conquest. Debt could do the job quietly. Egypt's experience became a lesson for the modern world. Financial dependence could be as powerful as military defeat. Once a country loses control of its finances, political independence becomes fragile. In Egypt's case, the sequence was clear. Debt created pressure. Pressure forced asset sales. Asset sales invited foreign oversight. Oversight became occupation. This pattern did not remain limited to Egypt. It repeated across the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Infrastructure projects promised modernization, but they often came with foreign financing. When revenues failed to meet expectations, creditors stepped in. Railways, ports, canals, ownership shifted quietly. The Suez Canal deal also changed how empires operated. Britain learned that influence could move faster than armies. Why fight wars when financial leverage worked better? This logic shaped imperial policy well into the 20th century, and it still echoes today. Modern states no longer arrive with gunboats. They arrive with loans, investments, and conditions. The language has changed. The mechanism has not. For Egypt, reclaiming the canal in 1956 was about more than revenue. It was about dignity. It was the reversal of a century-old imbalance created in 1875, a delayed answer to a rushed decision. But even that victory came with consequences. Global powers adjusted. New alliances formed. The Middle East entered a new era, one shaped by nationalism, superpower, rivalry, and economic vulnerability. The Suez Canal remains vital today. Global trade still depends on it, but its history reminds us of something deeper. Strategic assets are never just economic, they are political, and political control often begins quietly, long before soldiers arrive. The story of the canal shows how quickly sovereignty can slip away when decisions are made under financial pressure. It also shows that history does not move in moments alone. It moves in chains. One loan, one decision, one shift of power. The 48-hour deal did not just change Egypt's fate. It reshaped the Middle East, and it left behind a warning that still applies today. When nations trade long-term control for short-term relief, the cost is rarely visible at first, but history always sends the bill.